melts when I'm ocean waves.
Today on Nova Legends podcast, I have Washington Post reporter Spencer Nusbaum, who's done a great job of covering the recently completed prep basketball season and sure many other things. Spencer, thanks for joining me. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Again, as I was telling you before, I watch basically every episode that you put up, so I'm happy to be on it, for the first time.
Oh, well, that's nice of you to say that. Yeah, I'm glad to reach to someone. Sometimes I think I'm talking to myself here, so it's it's great. It's great for you to say that. Well, first, Spencer, let's talk about your background a little bit. One thing that we old athletes like me, we long for the time when the Washington Post and other papers covered high school sports. We played Tuesday and Friday. We'd go to meet the morning paper on Wednesday and Saturday just to see the box scores because there's really no other way to see who won the night before. There was no max preps. There was no internet. So the Washington Post high school coverage was very important. Also, we had local papers like the Fairfax Journal and other things that did a great job, but that was more of a 2 days later they'd cover. So what you do is very important to us, and you did a great job. You not only do you cover the games well, but you know what you're talking about. You understand the game. So how did you get started in sports?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Boston area, so I'm not necessarily a local, but I went to school at American University, which again is kind of right over from these Nova schools. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do in school, but I eventually found the campus paper. I figured out I was decent at writing and just kind of let it run from there. And then last year I was just doing some freelance for the Post, doing whatever coverage they could throw me on. Um, and I guess they thought I was again good enough to stick around. So yeah, been doing this. Did football in the fall, and we'll be doing baseball in the spring.
Yeah. So you do one sport at a time, and then you do the whole DC.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do for the fall and the winter. Again, it's just Northern Virginia, because we like to break those beats up. But yeah, it can be. We're not exactly super as deeply staffed, if that makes sense. Like we don't have maybe the dozen people that we maybe used to. Um, but it still is nice to break up for some of those big sports again, like basketball or like football. To break up and be able to cover only 60 teams as opposed to like 300 if you have all the schools.
Yeah. Do you think most of your readers are reading you online now, or most of them reading you in print?
I think it is online. The nice thing about, I guess, covering, because traditionally the print publication is going to draw parents and older readers, and that is a lot of what our base is. I think that we are still getting a decent amount in print, and anytime you have a story about these kids, generally they are going to want to see it in print and keep it in print, especially if they're mentioned in it. So we do still have that base, but definitely online, I think, is where they're getting most of it for sure.
Yeah. What do you see the future is, not only for journalists like yourself, but also for consumers of journalism like me? Where are we going to get are we going to continue to get our information from online, Twitter, Facebook groups like we have? What do you see? What do you see going forward?
I think it is online, and I think the other thing about that too, which kind of shapes our coverage, is I think back in the day, as you were saying, like people would want, and I think people still would want like those box scores showing up in the paper and all that. And again, if we had like a staff that was a dozen deep, maybe that would be a possibility. But one thing that I think that people really do appreciate is some of those like feature stories that, again, I've written and other people have written over some of the individual game stories. Those will always be valuable. We'll still always be doing those like once a week, especially for basketball. Trying to get those out. But I think what really draws people in, because people, it isn't like it used to, like people can see video. There's videographers at the games. There's social media that keeps people updated. Like people care about the game stories, quote unquote. Um, but people would come to us for kind of a deeper understanding, which is kind of what we're going for, even in those game stories, but also in those feature stories for sure.
Well, it's a deeper understanding, but it's one thing to appear in local media, Facebook groups, on Twitter. It's another thing to appear in an article in the Washington Post. There's a certain prestige that comes with that. That's not going to go away. It's maybe not quite as much for your generation, but it means a lot for, for older people when you're in the Washington Post. I mean, you've truly arrived. How about you? What are your goals in journalism? What else would you like to do? Do you enjoy doing media type stuff, like video type stuff as well? Or do you want to, most of your focus is going to be on print?
Yeah, I don't think I was destined to be in front of a camera as much as I am
You
right now.
do great.
Um, so I do really like this print side. And I also like the prep speed. Honestly, when I started out covering high school sports, I mean, I was like, oh, this is the best opportunity ever. But I was like, maybe this will be like a year-long thing or a 2-year-long thing. And honestly, like I've loved doing this so much that I kind of see it stretching out a little bit beyond that. I do a lot of work on the side in like coding and data and some of that sort of stuff. So potentially there's also a future on that sort of thing. But yeah, for the most part, I'll probably be sticking and writing because unlike you, I'm not built to be in front of a camera maybe once a week or multiple times a week.
I think thanks for the compliment, but I think you're selling yourself short. Are you surprised sometimes at the effect that you have, like when you show up at a game and people say, "Hey, thanks for the article." Are you surprised by the power that you possess at
A
times?
100%. Like I was talking with the Madison coach, Christian Stone before the girls basketball game. Uh, and she was like, "Oh, great article on this last week." And I forget that these coaches like read the articles. Like it is cool. And I understand like we are for sure getting a readership base. And obviously if we cover a team, the coaches and the players are going to read it. And that's something as I'm writing, I take a lot of care in because, for me, when I'm writing these stories, to me, it could just be another story. But to a lot of these kids or programs, or maybe not in Madison's case, but a lot of these schools, like this is the only time they're appearing all year or in 2 years or anything like that. Um, so there is a lot of care we have to take in like making sure that we, recognize the right things, we get everything right. But yeah, no, for sure. I every time someone's like, "Oh, great article" or whatever, like I always get surprised. I'm like, "Oh, thank you for reading it," because you never really know, who's out there.
Someone ever approached you and has been offended by something that you wrote?
Oh, of course, it doesn't happen too often, but I think again when you cover high school sports, and I hate to generalize, but I think I can say this maybe a little easier than some of the coaches can. Like again, 99% of the parents are great, but there's always some who think you should have included their kid in an article.
Oh yeah,
Their
yeah.
kid should have made all met, any of that. So there's definitely you can get pushback. But in terms of the quality of the writing, it's very rare that you'll get too much pushback because I think most of the people who do read are just like they're good souls and they don't want to cause any conflict. So for the most part, I'd say it's positive feedback, which you might not get covering politics or professional sports, anything like that. So it is nice for sure.
Yeah, only if you agree with them, you get positive
Yeah.
feedback in politics. So when the Washington Post does their polls or their all Met teams, is that done by committee? Like I've actually been contacted by Post and other jurisdictions, other papers and periodicals about certain polls or people. So I know there's some research that goes into it. But how are the all Met teams and all top 20s? How do you figure out who's going to be on those teams?
Yeah, so I'll start with the talking about the all Mets, because we actually made those selections yesterday or 2 days ago, I think. All season long, we're writing down names of kids that stand out, kind of getting our own lists and our own beats because we have me on Virginia, someone on DC and PG County public schools, someone on Maryland public schools, and someone on all the private schools. And so each of us kind of write down names on our beats of, players that we think should be all Mets. And then we send out nominations forms to all the coaches to see if there's anyone we missed, see if we can get additional stats or any of that. And then we spend, um, I don't know, like 2+ hours as a committee, kind of talking amongst ourselves, saying, okay, like this kid definitely has to be first team all Met. This kid has to be, you know, somewhere in our first four teams, etc. And we kind of break it up from there. And again, so the private schools will get, in general, more than any of our other individual beats, just because I mean, you look around this area, kids are leaving for private schools, the top kids for the most part. So that is why they are again they make up more of a percentage than any of our other individual beats, but we make sure like we're honoring if you dominated your area, you're gonna be on one of these teams and you're gonna be represented. So that's kind of how we do all Mets is just kind of an end of year meeting. And we chat throughout the year too, like, oh, like that was a really big win. Maybe that's a coach of the year type win or something like that. So that's honored there. And then for our weekly top 20s, so I'm in charge of the girls basketball top 20, and then Mike Larigo, who's another one of our reporters who's really strong, is in charge of our boys basketball top 20. And so we kind of send out an initial list to our committee every week via email, and then just get responses back like, "Hey, I think you moved so and so up too far, so and so down too far," and we'll kind of debate on that sort of thing every week. And yeah, it's a relatively straightforward process. It's admittedly very difficult, and because I think that is the thing that people love the feature stories, but they do care a lot about these all Mets and these top 20s, I think maybe more than anything else. So we want to make sure that we get those right for sure.
Well, the polls affect more people. If you have a top 20 poll,
Yeah.
that's 12 players per team, 20 teams, whereas you can only write articles about a couple players a week. So you get a lot of pushback on polls. People call you pissed off. Hey, we should be number 8. Does that happen quite often?
Yeah, it happens especially for our year event or our end of year polls. I think that people, are really because I think those have the most movement because that's when the champions are decided. That's when we make our biggest leaps. Um, so yeah, people aren't always. I say we get more negative feedback on polls than positive feedback, but it again, it's not something like they're they can make their own polls, and yeah, I'm not trying to be snide or anything here. I guess what I'm trying to get at is everyone's going to have a different opinion on the top 20 teams out of 300 in an area, so it's not anything we take personally. And personally, like I appreciate the feedback because it's interesting to see what other people feel like. But yeah, it's not always rosy, I guess I'd say.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we appreciated this year is we had in Northern Virginia, we had 2 teams in the polls in the post top 5 by the end of the year. We had Patriot and the champion back-to-back champion Hayfield, which was great. I don't people say it hadn't happened in many years. I'm not sure if that's true or not. Is that something that you had to work on? I mean, you're the one covering Northern Virginia. Is it up to you to tell people, look, these teams are quality. They've beaten so and so. Hayfield's only lost to Jackson Reed. So was that a dialogue that you have to take on yourself?
Yeah, it is. And again, that's the decision we had to talk about, obviously, because it's not something we're going to do every year. But if you watch Hayfield and Patriot, like those are by far the 2 best public schools in Northern Virginia. I think you could throw, Jackson Reed in there as obviously another one of those really high quality public schools, but that's kind of that is the top tier. You watch them, and then you watch like I was at the WCAC championship game, like I'm watching these other private school games. I'm pulling them up on streams every now and then. Uh, so I'm seeing what it's like them compared to other schools in the area. And frankly, we also have to reward winning. Like if Hayfield's going 30-1 against the schedule that they put out, which is a very difficult schedule, and they dominate their beat, that's valuable against some of these again WCAC schools who they compete against in the fall and summer. They beat occasionally in the fall and summer, and they go 20-9 against their schedule or whatever. Like something that's a different animal. We aren't the March Madness tournament committee or anything like that. Like I think that in general we do our best, and uh, you know we understand that there's not like a whole lot of historical precedent, but people care every year about what our rankings are. So we're gonna put thought and care into them. And frankly, if you watch Hayfield and Patriot, you understand why they're number 4 and number 5.
Well, if you want to play alternative history right now, can you imagine if Hayfield would have beaten Jackson Reed and they controlled the first half? I thought the officiating was terrible that night. Not that they're better than Jackson Reed, but I think anybody could have won that game. I think it would have been a dilemma if they would have finished undefeated again, because Civil Friends obviously has more Division One talent. But if Hayfield would have finished undefeated champion again, it'd have been tough to deny them the number 1 spot in the DC area, probably.
Yeah, I don't want to say I'm happy that because again, Los is probably going to watch this.
Yeah, I'm sure
I'm
he
not
will.
going to say that. I'm not gonna say that I'm happy that they lost that game. But it made it a little bit easier because I don't again I haven't been around for too long, so I don't know if the last time we had a public school at number one in the end of year rankings. But I would A, assume it's been a while, and B, yeah, it would have been a difficult choice when you have a bunch of Division 1 kids versus by far the best public team, but whatever.
Yeah, I believe the last Virginia team to do it, surprisingly, may have been Westfield in 2016. They had that guy who's in the G League, D League right now. I should know that.
Mhm.
But anyway, I'm not sure. It hasn't been very many over the years. Um, so anyway, so the Hayfield Patriot game. What did you think about? What did you think about the game? I mean, obviously, going into the game, I thought it was a toss up. I thought Patriot could have won the first game, but that was a long time ago. But Patriots defense has been unbelievable the last month or so, and Hayfield's been solid, but it's not like they were necessarily peaking for this game. They've just been good all year. What did you think going into the game, and what did you think about the game?
Yeah, so I actually went on a local news station right before
I
and
saw.
predicted that yeah, Patriot would win by one. So that was idiotic. But no,
Are you
like it
looking for a new
was
job? Looking for a new job this week?
yeah, I guess I am. Um, yeah, so I thought it was gonna be a wash coming in. Best defensive team in the area against probably the best offensive team. Talent wise, basically even. Hayfield, I think, has a little bit better of a big three. Patriot, you could argue either way, but their depth, one through they got six guys basically scoring 10 points per game. It's not quite that, but 10 guys or six guys who basically have the capability to do that. So I thought it was going to be a wash. I also thought the game, I know things always slow down in the championship game. I think in the post game presser, um, Sherm said something along the lines of, "I don't know why people were predicting it to be in the 70s. That's never what a championship game is." But that's what I thought it might be. But no, it was kind of a slop fest, to be honest, in
It
the
was.
in the final. I think the team shot like 30% from the field or something like that and missed all their threes but one, both of them. Um, so yeah, it wasn't the most aesthetically pleasing game like I think the season opener was. But you could still tell they were two great basketball teams who were doing what they could on defense. And um, yeah, I think that again, we're gonna move ahead to next year eventually. I'm sure we'll talk about kind of predictions for next season. Um, but and it's not like Hayfield probably isn't going to be back in the state championship game. Yeah, I'd never say never after what Madison's been doing on the girls' side, but uh, those are two teams who will go down pretty historically, I think. As kind of those and potentially rivals in future years. I know that Sherman Los like each other, so we'll see. Um, but yeah, no, I thought it was a really good matchup, really highly anticipated. I just wish it had come a little closer down. So maybe next year, sure, you guys can uh, pull it out that time.
Yeah. I was sitting next to Carrie Cachonas. She's in the Hall of Fame at George Mason, averaged like 30 a game in Annandale. And she'd never seen either team play. And the girls' game was so well played. I mean, it was just quality all over the place, great 3-pointers, great post plays, ball was swinging. The boys' game was just a mess. And she was like,
Yeah,
"Are you sure these teams are good?" I'm like, "I've seen them play all year long. They're great, but they kind of neutralize each other and they kind of play into each other's strengths. So it's kind of hard for them to show their quality when they're playing each other. And then I think there's like nerves out there and just there was just a lot going on. But anyway, Hayfield by far is a worthy champ. Congratulations to Coach Carlos. What do you think about Sidwell Friends? So all year long we heard the Paul VI hype. Gonzaga was number one for most of the year. St. John's was up there. I saw Sidwell Friends often because a buddy of mine's son plays for them. Um, and Bryce Griffin, he comes off the bench. And I knew that team. Caleb Williams, to me, is the best player in DC. And the kid is so confident. He's so smart. He's so poised. He's a leader. He does it all. He's unbelievable. And I was surprised all year because they lost quite a few games. I think they lost 5 or 6 games, and they seemed like they had their ups and downs. But I always thought you got to beat Sidwell Friends to win this thing. They are good. So were you surprised they ended up coming out on top?
yeah. Honestly, a little bit. Again, I try to watch these games as much as I can, but I get a lot of my private school knowledge through our private school reporter, and I was under the impression that it was going to be Paul VI all year. Obviously they don't play in like the DC championships, but in terms of DC area, I figured it was them and everyone else. I knew going into the WCAC championships that St. John's had a shot, but not a, you know, I didn't expect them to win. So yeah, we're kind of thinking about them as the top two WCAC teams, and Sidwell, they lost to St. Andrews, I think on a wild buzzer beater or something like that. Um, so clearly, I mean, they can play, but they haven't been, spotless. So it's hard to put them at number one all year if you haven't been spotless. Like we moved when Paul VI was the number two team in the country. I think we had him at number two because, I think maybe another team was undefeated in WCC play. I might be wrong about that, but regardless, I guess I'm trying to say here is I didn't fully expect Sedwell to be number one for as much talent as they had. They have him. They have trying to remember his name, Jalen.
Yeah, I can think. Yeah,
I don't want to mess up the pronunciation of his last name, but I know how it's spelled. He's dominant, and obviously, Caleb gets a lot of the hype. Um, but yeah, I mean, it makes sense that they're number one at the end of the year. You watch them play, um, you see their schedule, you see what they've done. Yeah, that is one hell of a team. So it's a deserved number one spot, and I haven't really looked at whether we've gotten pushback on our boys' side, at least at number one. But I wouldn't imagine there's too much debate that they were the top team in DC this year.
now they won the games they had to win at the end.
Yeah.
It really matters. One team that had a really poor season this year, and you probably didn't see him very much, was DeMatha. And not a poor season for most teams, but for DeMatha. And they had a first-year coach who's going to do a tremendous job. I think his name is Mike Jones. He was at St. Stephen's. There's so many Mike Joneses. I get
Yeah.
confused. But anyway, they ended up winning the Alhambra tournament at the end of the year, which is an incredibly prestigious tournament. Did you keep up with DeMatha at all this year?
Only a little bit. Again, I knew that they won Alhambra. I mean, I think like the second Mike Jones, I think he coached real well at least from what I've heard at St. Stephen's.
Yeah.
And they'll be fine next year. It's rare that you're going to get a coach coming in on year one. It happens, but it's rare you're going to get a coach on year one and everything's going to work out. Especially at that, when you're playing that sort of schedule.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're going to get out coached because I don't think that's a fair assessment. But it takes time for things to come together, no matter if it's Coach K or Mike Jones behind a team. So I think they'll be fine next year. And again, that's a program that historically expects a lot. So I don't know if there's pressure on their backs, but I'm sure that that factors into it a little bit as well.
And you couldn't end the season much better than they did. And, the coach is a high tempo type coach, and maybe he needs, different type of athletes to add to what he already has. But anyway, it was a great season. Let's go with some of your favorite players in the area. Are there any guys? I mean, obviously there's Greg Jones, DJ Holloway, and some of the, Jordan Scott. But those are the top players. Are there guys that we don't talk about that much that you think are very good players?
Well, I will tell you those. First, I just want to shout out David King, who's on again the Hayfield. I think a coach's dream and probably the most fun I've had watching a player this year. But he gets plenty of hype, so I'll talk about some of the other players. Alexandria City, the Robinson brothers, Cullen and Kai were really good and did a really good job playing off each other. I wish I had gone out to see them in person a little bit more. But watching the tape and again seeing those guys, I think Cullen is going off to college and Kai has another year. But yeah, they were real fun to watch. God, there's so many. The Tuscarora had a three-headed monster out in Loudoun County, headed by Jaden Johnson, who's a fun guy to watch. God, I gotta go through like the kind of all Met honorees or nominations in my head and figure this out. Let's see, who are some of the other there was just so many. Battlefield, obviously Maddox is a talented 3-point shooter, but when I saw them play Patriot in that first game, Hassan, I don't want to mispronounce his last name, Hamid, I think, he was locked in. Like he was chirping, he was laughing. I think he's headed off to play in college next year.
Christopher Newport.
Yeah, he's a dog. he was real fun to watch, and um, definitely deserves his flowers for the season. And I think even Sherm had like retweeted one of his highlight videos, which if we know like if for him to retweet anything Battlefield is pretty rare. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was special. Tay Barber at Osborne, they didn't have the greatest season, but I think he has 9 Division 1 offers or something like that at this point. Yeah, for a Northern Virginia public school kid, that's crazy. We talked about Jordan Scott. He'll be special. He's already special. He'll be real special in a year. Um, God, what other teams are in this area? At the Patriot District had a lot of talented kids. Um, Fairfax, Margod
Oh, love that.
was he's something else. Um, yeah, no, there was just so much talent in the area this year, which was really cool. Forest Park had big guy down low, Brandon Adozie.
Yeah.
I watched them beat Potomac, who on their own, Potomac is a team that is can basically 5 guys who can pass, dribble, shoot, and they couldn't really hang with Brandon Josie at Forest Park, who's just a sophomore. So he's someone who could really be taking over next year. No, there's so many names out there that um, I'm forgetting right now, and I'm gonna feel bad about it later. Marshall has a kid who
Keith
I think
Leonard.
is a
Keith
yeah,
Leonard. Yeah.
who's like a soccer star and also
Right.
happens to be a little, decent at basketball on the side. And shout out Coach Lynn. He's fantastic to talk to, and um, they exceeded a lot of teams' expectations this year. So that on the boys' side, I'd say those are the ones that really stood out.
I think it's a great list. So when you start thinking about your preseason top 20 for next year, and I know one team is going to be near the top. What teams are you thinking about right now?
Yeah, I think we're probably both thinking South Lakes toward the top. Yeah. Mike Desmond also just shout out Mike is one of the funniest coaches I talk to because he pretends and he does this in front of his team, so I don't think I'm sharing a secret here. He pretends that he doesn't like his team or like that he's super pessimistic
Yeah.
about what they're going to do, but I think deep down he knows that he believes in them and they know that he believes in them. So he's a fun guy to talk to. But yeah, Jordan Scott, they're basically all underclassmen, and they were the third best team in Nova this year. Um, so they'll probably be high up. Patriot, I mean they're losing Nas and Jay, but that's a deep and talented team that has kids that are going to be seniors next year. I'd be surprised if they aren't in it, and it'll probably come down to there will be a third spot up for grabs. Um, it's hard to say at the moment who that'll be. A lot of talented seniors this year that are going to be um, leaving. I think there's a few teams to watch out for. I mean, we can't discount Hayfield has reserves coming in. Might be hard to justify them in the top 20, but the way that again Lewis and those kids talk about some of the kids who are coming up, they definitely have potential. And yeah, honestly, I think I think South Lakes is the undisputed, probably top team in our preseason next year. I'll need a little time to marinate and see kind of how the offseason shakes out if any kids transfer, because that happens every now and then before we make any sort of grand statements. I guess I'm good. Do you have any that you feel like might be up there as well?
Well, I didn't see them play, but I'm hearing Forest Park is going to be tough next year. You mentioned the big guy, but I understand they're pretty young because they lost some of their senior players at early in the season. I actually think Hayfield. I would not be surprised if Hayfield's back in the state tournament next year.
Yeah,
With Andy Ramirez, they got the freshman sophomore Parker Cage. They have some good players that didn't play a lot, and I have a feeling they're going to get some transfers in this year as well. So I would not I would not count Hayfield out. Madison, Miles Franklin, probably to me, maybe my favorite player in the area other than Jordan Scott. I think Miles, we've just scratched the surface on how good he is. I bumped into his uncle, Daryl Franklin, who was a Washington Post Player of the Year in '92, played at American. Great player, awesome guy. And his brother Derek, who played at Boston, who was Miles's dad. He's a 16-year-old kid, and he's a senior. Probably could reclass and probably grow up a little more like, I hope he doesn't, because I think Madison's going to have him, and they're going to have Wyatt Norton coming back. So, they look like they're going to be very tough on paper as well. We'll have to wait and see. But well, let's go over to the girls. Let's give the girls their due, and I guess start off right away with four-time state champion. I lost track, and I guess because I didn't think they're going to be that great this year. It kind of snuck up on me that they won four state championships in a row. So what'd you think about Madison and in their historic run?
Yeah, again, I'm calling these kids, I'm calling their coach all season, and every single time I'm on the phone with them, they're like, I'm like, I didn't believe in this team, and I still don't know if I believe in this team. And every time, like, I have never seen a team care less about what other teams think about them. And it's not just them saying that. They're not at the end of the year, they weren't like, oh, everyone counted us out, da da da. They're just like, they're so professional, they're so locked into what they do. And the other thing too is you can tell, and I don't want to say that they're only just well coached, because there are talented kids on that team and they're the ones who do everything. They got some dogs on that team as well. Um, but yeah, no, when you talk about them being well coached, it isn't just exceeding expectations. It's the way that they play. As you said in the championship game, they're hitting every backdoor cut. They're not turning the ball over. Defensively, they're making every single rotation that they're supposed to make. I saw Manchester, the players before the game when Madison walked out. I don't know if the Madison players know this. I mean, they probably saw it a little bit. I saw them like laughing and whispering to each other. The Manchester players, they were like, "Those kids are so small," like saying stuff like that. Um, Manchester is probably the most talented girls basketball team in public school that I've seen this year, and Madison beat them. Like, there's not too much more you can say about that. But yeah, no, that is one hell of a team, and they were in and out of our rankings all year this year. They started at 15, then they dropped out, back at 17, dropped out, 20, dropped out, and the end of the year, I think jumping from 17 to 6 or something like that, because you just watched. I mean, not only did they progress this season, but they knew how to win. They knew how to win late, and frankly, I mean that does enough to get you that big bump.
Yeah, that Manchester team was scary. They had Mia Woolfolk, like a 6'3",
Yeah,
incredible post player. You might have heard me talk about her father, Pete Woolfolk, one of the best high school posts I've ever seen. She plays just like him. She like rolls to the hole. She can shoot. She handles the ball. Two knockdown shooters, freshman and a sophomore, Rain White, right? I forgot the other girl's name, but I couldn't believe how good this team was. And Madison just moved the ball around, and Coach Stone made all the right decisions. It was a coaching masterpiece. Um,
yeah.
but even to get there, I would have bet on Robinson, not because I went to Robinson, but on paper. I didn't get to see him this year, but I know they had the Simonson sisters. But they destroyed everybody in the postseason, and they get to Madison, and Madison, I think, beats them 40-22. Did you see that game?
Yeah, I think it ended up being 34 to 24, I want to say.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I watched the game after, because again, I told Coach Stone this. I was like, I really thought Robinson was gonna win, and she's like, that's fine, like I get it. But yeah, no, Robinson all year. Honestly, I thought that it was gonna when the state tournament started. I thought if Osborne Park could get past Manchester in the first round, I thought they would win states. Um, I again all year I was thinking that it was Robinson and it was Osborne Park as the two best teams in Northern Virginia. Two really well coached teams, Coach Dade at Robinson and Coach Chrissy Kelly at Osborne Park. But yeah, Robinson, I watched them just handle Oakton in the state quarterfinals, and that was a team that was disciplined. It was a team that, again, Madison has dealt with teams that are bigger than them, because I think a lot of teams can hang with them in that way. Robinson's a big team that it's hard to deal with their posts. And they just did. And I guess that's, Madison had a special season, but Robinson too, just because they lost in the state semis. And I'm sure that that's a disappointment for them. We can't discount what they did this year, because they got a lot of talent on that roster. And um, I just want to shout out Osborne Park too. It all starts with Alana Powell, who is, special. I don't believe she's going. I don't think she has any Division One offers, but You look at her and you look at the way the Arnley sisters on Madison played last year. It's real similar. Like I think she could go D1. They're probably deserves to have a D1 offer, and the team too. I mean, they had 6 freshmen, a lot of whom played well. Corey Cole played really well for them. Um, I wouldn't be surprised to see Osborne Park back in the rankings next year. But yeah, they were unbelievable this year. I thought they had a season that really deserves some credit. They just couldn't get past Manchester.
Yeah, I didn't see them play. I understand they kind of live and die by the outside shot, and maybe they were because I know they lost to Patriot early, which was a surprise. So they did have some road bumps along the way, but I understand they were really talented. Did you one thing we didn't mention, where is Madison's point guard going to school next year? She reminds me of the Arnold sisters, and they play like I forgot her name, but she's got 4 rings. Again, she's got
Caleb Dick,
yeah. Where is she
yeah.
going? Where's she going to
Oh,
school?
I wish I knew that off the top of my head. I hope
Yeah.
she's. I mean, honestly, I don't know where. I don't follow the commitments too closely, so I wish I knew
Mm.
um where she was headed. But no, she. I mean, to have 4 rings, she's she might be the. I gotta check the record book. She might be the only kid in Northern Virginia public schools on the girls' side to have 4 state championship rings. Because she's their only 4-year varsity player. Yeah, no, she can hoop. Like she showed out in the state finals. She showed out. And one thing I also want to mention, I watched Madison beat Oakton 20-15 earlier this year because they just held the ball for a quarter and a half. Um, but even in that game in the first half when they were actually, playing offense, I saw her then. Um, yeah, no, I mean, they got a lot of talented kids and kids who know to play in that system, but Kayla Dixon's someone who could, thrive anywhere. She's real good.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to see Brentsville play this year?
Yeah, I saw Brentsville in the state finals. I told their coach this too. I was surprised to see them in there. Um, I don't want to discount their run. I will say Meridian had their top player injured for the state semis.
Okay.
So that always factors in, obviously. But Brentsville, when she was healthy and when Meridian was healthy, Brentsville was a team that was hanging with them in the last 2 games, and Brentsville was a team that was not healthy all year. Alden Yergi is their star player. She is going Division 1, and it makes a lot of sense. Um, I mean, not only just as a player, but as a person, really mature. Um, Someone who, again, is really um, again, I don't want to call any reporter out, but like she's the sort of kid where someone mispronounced one of her teammates' names in the post game presser, and Alden very respectfully was like, it's Kara, it's not Carla. Um, so yeah, but just an unbelievable player who all season was playing at like 50-60% because she had a really bad foot injury. She was averaging close to 30 last year. It was about 20 this season. Um, but yeah, Brentsville was a fun team to watch for a quarter in the state final, and then they ended up. I mean, the team they played, Carroll County, is probably yeah. Them and Manchester are probably the 2 most talented. It might actually be Carroll County, down in Class 3 is probably the most talented team I've seen this year. There was no getting through them.
Yeah. Yeah. They only lost 1 game. I think it was a team in Georgia. What about Tuscarora? Both the boys and the girls, I think, got to the state quarters because they had a double header there. Did you get a chance to see them?
I saw them in the regular season. I didn't see them in the playoffs, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Um, Again, Tuscarora girls, I can start with them because
Yeah.
I think they were just a hair better than the boys, but I mean, they got to the same level. So, but yeah, no, I think it was actually the state semis. The Tuscarora girls lost by 1 in the semis, I want to say. Um, Starts with Grace Middleton, who's the third Middleton sister to star at
Mm.
Tuscarora. I think all 3 of them, there's like 1,000-point scorers in Tuscarora history, and 3 of them are the Middleton sisters, which is a fun little nugget. They're really good in transition. They'll probably, even though they're losing uh, Grace Middleton, they'll be back next year. Alyssa Kerrigan is like a high jump like state
Wow.
finalist or something. So she averages like 3 blocks a game or something crazy. Um, and they're a well coached team, so they should be back next year. And the boys team should be back as well again. Jaden Johnson, TJ Duggan, forgetting some of the other names, but Michael Newkirk, who used to coach the girls and now coaches the boys. Um, the Tuscarora boys should be back next year. They're really talented, and I got to see them play against Loudoun County earlier this year, and that's kind of been the monkey on their back for a while. Um, Obviously, Loudoun County lost their star player at the start of the season. I always like to mention those injuries so coaches don't get mad at me. But again, Tuscarora was a team that uh, really kind of exceeded my. I didn't really know what to expect coming out of them. Um, Start of the season, and they deserve everything they got because they had a crazy good season for sure.
Yeah, it seems like those Loudoun County teams are getting stronger and stronger. And there's a lot of balance. There's so many division. There's like 20 schools in Loudoun County now, so a lot of talent. Well, let's go to players on the girl side that are unsung. It's funny because there wasn't the big names this year as there was in years past. So we probably have a lot of unsung players. But anyway, what are a few of your players that we didn't hear a lot about, but they're good players?
Yeah, beyond the ones that I already mentioned, the Alana Powells, the Kayla Dixons, the Georgia Simonsons at Robinson, and the other Amelia Simonson. Um, yeah, I mean, there's too many to name, so I apologize ahead of time that I'm gonna miss naming all these talented kids. Um, Starting off, I mean, Edison had a bit of a down season, but Tony McCray has had a good string of years there. I'm trying to think of all the teams that were really good this season. Let's see, Tuscarora, we said Grace Middleton, um, Angelina Nice at Woodgrove. I saw her carry a talented but kind of Woodgrove lost a lot of players at the end of last season, had some transfers. Um, and graduations, and obviously the passing that I wrote about earlier this season. But yeah, Angelina Nice was someone who carried a talented Woodgrove team above Briar Woods, and at least in the regular season for a game. Briar Woods is a team that's really kind of put itself on the radar these past couple of years and was able to finally beat Woodgrove, which was kind of the monkey on their back. And for them, a lot of it starts with Hope Drake, who I think is just a junior. Um, and they're a team that should, when we're talking about teams that could be winning the state title next year, um, in Class 5, I think Briar Woods is probably the favorite from Northern Virginia. Um,
Wow.
they're really good. The Concord district always has a lot of really good names. Um, Oakton, Caitlin Crump, I think she's headed off to Christopher Newport. Which again, their girls program is incredible. And she's someone who has been kind of the engine of that team this year. They've got a lot of kind of undersized players and players who are really good in their roles, but not necessarily, superstars. They got a really good freshman, who I can't remember the name of off the top of my head. Um, but yeah, Caitlin Crump is someone who is really good this season. McLean has, I forget if it's Kara or Kara, but I think Kara Bresmer, I think was player of the year in the district. And Langley has a kid, Anya Rahman, who's just a sophomore. I watched her again, them play McLean, and while McLean won the district championship, man, she is really, really good. She's someone who, again, she's a little undersized. But in terms of pure play from the guard position, um, scoring, playmaking, any of that, she's up there with the best I've seen this year. She was really good. Gainesville, Madison McKenzie. Gainesville's a second year program that made it to the state tournament. Which is not something that happens very often for second year programs. They're another team that maybe at the start of next year could be high up there because they're young. But yeah, Madison McKenzie. Unfortunately, both times I watched them in person, she was injured. But when seeing her on tape and knowing what that team can do, she's real good. Potomac, again, that district had a bit of a down year. Or the again, but Potomac itself, LaJayla Lipscomb, her sister was their star last year. She's their star this year. At Madison, we've named some names, but Stella Gugufkas, who hit the game winner in overtime, the and one, which was incredible. Sarah Link was probably their second. I don't want to say anyone was their second or third best player, but um, she was a star this year. So she was really good. At Centerville, they had the district player of the year. I think Janaya Marion. I want to say her name is. Again, I wish I had seen them a little more this year than I did. Um, but she was really good. And then yeah, I mean Elizabeth Creed at Meridian. There's too many names to throw them all out, but those are some kids who were really good this year.
Well, look, Spencer, this has been great. I really enjoyed meeting you and listening to you. I mean, you really know your craft really well, and I've been following your work this year. I really enjoyed it. Are you willing to give us any spoilers for the All Met team?
I don't think I am. I know that I named some kids who are going to be on All Mets. I'd say that's as far as it goes. Um, but yeah, we're still kind of finalizing those decisions this week. Um, Probably before because I'm taking Thursday and Friday off for just watching March Madness.
Yeah.
But some of it, which is a nice perk of my job. But uh, before the games, I guess on Thursday and Friday, I'll be kind of finalizing because I'm in charge of the girls' side, especially. So finalizing some of those decisions. But
And who's your pick for the NCAA?
oh yeah, I'm not confident, but I've gone with, and this goes against history because it's always a defensive team that ends up, going all the way, or at least a strong defensive team. I've had Gonzaga in I think 7 of the past 8 years, despite the fact they've never won. And I always end up talking myself into them. And I did it again this year for some reason because it's just such a chaotic year. So that's who I got on the guys' side. And then the women's bracket, it's South Carolina. I don't know why we talk ourselves into anyone else. There's other good teams, Indiana's good, Virginia Tech, Stanford, UConn, Indiana, who I already said. But yeah, it's South Carolina for sure on the women's side.
Yeah. If you need anyone to book that money on Gonzaga, I'll book it because I mean they've burned up a lot of chalk money over the last 7, 8 years. But
Yeah.
but who knows? Maybe this is a great program, great coach. Maybe this is your year. But Spencer, look, this has been great. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. Enjoy the games today. I hope to get some. I got a lot to do today. But if I can get my work done, I'm going to enjoy myself. But maybe we can meet in person one day. Have a beer or whatever, and talk some more about Northern Virginia basketball.
For sure. And thanks for having me on. This was great.
Oh, of course. Yes, but have a good day now, buddy. Enjoy the games.
You too. Take care.
Okay, take care.